Welcome to the Primary Care Practice Collaboration System. It's a knowledge base for practice support in Vermont, brought to you by the Vermont Blueprint for Health. Practices in Vermont working on things like NCQA, patient-centered medical home recognition, with help from Blueprint, VCHIP, Vital and others, will suffer the same difficulties. And not just in PCMH, but in things like meaningful use, EMR issues, panel management. And that problem is that there's no easy method for sharing knowledge between practices. This model shows how practices are largely isolated from each other in terms of day-to-day knowledge sharing. When they want to know an answer to a question, they send it up to practice facilitators. If we don't know the answer, we send it up to VCHIP. If VCHIP doesn't know the answer, they send it to NCQA. And on the downward side, NCQA notifies VCHIP, who notifies practice facilitators, who then eventually will get the answer down to the practice. It's a tightly controlled but largely inefficient method of answering questions. The system we want to build is much more horizontal than that. We want practices to be able to share their knowledge and their experiences and their answers to various questions in a centralized system, so that they can also answer each other's questions with their own experiences. The level of practice facilitation moderates this activity on a day-to-day basis, as does that of VCHIP. The link between VCHIP and NCQA still exists there in case of specific problematic issues. It's much more efficient. What are the pros and cons of the current state? Well, right now information is tightly controlled, so it's got a pretty high accuracy. The cons, the time between the thought and the answer is pretty lengthy. And the speed of the system loses those thought opportunities. When these happen day to day, it's very easy for somebody to think something and go, oh, I'll have to ask somebody about that later, and then forget about it and it's gone, it's lost. With a system such as this available on demand, they can put those questions out there and get a response very quickly. The future state pros and cons. Well, the pros, the system's available at the speed of thought. As soon as that thought happens, they can get onto the system and they can put a question out there and forget about it largely. The resources are available from a combined knowledge base of users immediately, on demand. And the system's still moderated by practice facilitators and VCHIP. And so therefore we're enhancing the likelihood of the answers being right. The cons are we've got a slightly increased risk of bad information being published and used, and it's one more system to remember to use. The philosophy and goals behind this are pretty simple. The vision is to drastically reduce the time in a primary care practice from thought and question to answer and action. And also to back that up, to reduce the number of lost opportunities to gather and share knowledge, and to increase the practice operations knowledge of the Blueprint community. We've developed the system using Basecamp, which is our Blueprint communication and project management tool. It's stable and easy to use, and it's secure. It's by invitation only. Send me an email with your or whoever else you want to invite, name, practice, physician, and email address to lee@bryanresearch.com. I'll set up the account and notify you. You respond to the invitation email and sign in, and that's it. You're registered. The system only works if you use it. Every time a question crosses your thoughts about practice operations, go to the system and ask the question, and keep a link to the system on your desktop for easy access so you can get to it right away. Get into the habit of logging on every day to review not only your own questions and answers, but those of others too. Categories are primary identifiers for questions. You'll see in the associated video what we're talking about here. We've set categories up as logical subjects. The initial question within the category is set up as an introductory heading. And finally, you can add and browse relevant files that are associated with those categories. And here's the video just to show you exactly how that works. When people in a primary care practice have a question that they need to get answered, largely regarding things like patient-centered medical home, but also with things like meaningful use or electronic medical records, they have to go through a series of hoops to be able to get to the right person with the right answers. We wanted to develop a site where, instead of having to go through those hoops, we could have a more horizontally based practice-to-practice peer network where people can share their own experiences and their own answers to questions that they may have. The Primary Care Practices Collaboration site, hopefully, is the first step in producing this system. We've produced this on the Basecamp project management system, and as such there are a few navigation issues that we need to go through on this video. The first one being, as you can see with the opening page, we have a series of messages set up, all of which are in the form of headings. We need to use the categories on the right hand side to be able to filter these so that we can get to the ones that we really want to use. So say for instance we had a question regarding PCMH 2014 section 3 population health management. We'd click on the category and that would bring up just those headings in section 3 as you can see here. So let's say for the sake of argument you wanted to ask something about blood pressure with the date of update for more than 80% age 3 years and older, 3B3 in the standard. We'd click on add a comment because this initial one, even though you can click on it, is actually the question heading. So if you want to ask a question, click on add a comment. It'll bring up a box just like any other bulletin board, and you can type your question in here. You can preview it if you'd like. If you feel okay with that, add this comment, and then that question will go in there. If we go back to all messages right at the moment, you can see that this is right at the top now of the list because these messages on here are all gauged according to time. So you can see the most frequent one, the most active discussions, according to what's closest to the top. If you wanted to go back to population health management and see if there'd been any responses at a later date, you just click on that, go down to the blood pressure issue. You can see here there's one comment, which is yours. Nobody's responded yet, so you don't have a response to it. If somebody had responded, there would be a comment underneath it and there would be a message thread just like any other normal message board. So who responds to these questions that we put on the system? Well, the primary respondents are going to be other participants. As more people use the system, responses are going to become more frequent. This is an aggregation effect, and with more participants in there, the better the quality of the knowledge that comes out and the faster the responses. Also, practice facilitators will be moderating, and we're going to check in daily if possible to provide that first level of moderation. But also we're going to have VCHIP interaction also, who are also going to check in frequently, possibly daily but no less than weekly, to verify those answers that are being given are actually the correct ones. So that's the system. If there are any questions about setup, registration, navigation, moderation, or anything else about the system, just email me on lee@brianresearch.com. Thanks for listening and watching.